Hello, you wonderful people. So for today's video, I'm going to talk about the official trailer that came out for Y: The Last Man. If you haven't seen it already, I'll include a link to it in the description down below. First and foremost, I have not read the graphic novel that this series is based on. I do know that it is getting this adapted has been like a long process. Like, it's been something in the works for a couple years. But actually going into this, I had actually no idea what the plot of this series was. Like, I looked a little into like the graphic novel enough to know it was a post-apocalyptic circumstance. I didn't realize like where the title being so literal, which I mean, obviously like most series have literal titles. It's not like a Bleach situation of, oh, why is this series called Bleach? I mean, maybe there still is a reason behind that. I've just never known, regardless, tangents and all that aside. But I was thinking like I took it as like, oh, he's literally the last person on Earth. Maybe there might be other people, kind of very much like the comedy series, kind of something in that vein. Obviously a lot more dramatic. I thought it was that, but it is, well, it's still kind of that, but even more literal, because he is literally the last man. Hence the Y in the title of this series being, the Y chromosome, the last man. So I thought that was such an interesting thing. A lot of things that are kind of going through my mind immediately is like, I'm curious, like whatever this virus situation is, it does seem like it might have been done on purpose. Is kind of what everyone's kind of trying to figure out. But I'm curious, was it a slow creeping process of like, oh, maybe it struck the US first and then it eventually spread to the rest of the world? Or was it kind of like a simultaneous, like all the men in the world dropped dead except for this one dude? Why? Maybe there's like just some genetic anomaly. Maybe he was doing something at the time that protected him from the virus. Is it something that's still ongoing? Like, what about people who were pregnant at the time? Like, if you were pregnant with a boy, did that boy die? Or is that going to be an element that pops up in this series of, oh, like there can be new men born into the world if someone was already pregnant at the time? Or maybe you get into the element of, well, if there's some like maybe frozen semen or something like that. Like, I'm going into some like, but I think like under these circumstances, like repopulating in that regard, like I'm sure a lot of that has to be considered and thought of, as well. But kind of, like, like I said, is it just a perpetual thing? Like there's something in the air that will just kill all men except for this dude? Because obviously it's not just men, it is just the male species in general. Like, because do you even see the like this messed up thing of like, I think this woman was going to wake up her children and finding them dead. And like, that's horrific. So we're not just dealing with like, oh, fathers, husbands, and brothers. We're also dealing with like sons and children. It's like, that's rough. And even like showing that one particular like military, like he's a general or whatever, or maybe he's a president or whatever, but then like you see like the veins like from something spreading in his face, and then him just like bleeding from his nose and then coughing up like a large stream of blood, and it cuts away. I was like, that's super, these deaths are probably going to be super like virusy, brutal, in the sense of like people coughing up blood, their skin changing type of thing. It's probably going to get kind of graphic like that. Aside from that, like tonally, it feels like it reminds me of the 12 Monkeys TV series, which I haven't looked into who's behind this series, so maybe there's people connected to the 12 Monkey series behind this, and if they are, well, that kind of makes sense. If not, still the thing applies, because if you're unaware, like 12 Monkeys, the TV show, is like one of my favorite, if not my favorite, sci-fi series. So it's kind of similar in that vein of like, I mean, obviously minus the time travel, but that aspect of like this virus, and like you kind of get the end result in that because of the whole time travel angle, but you also get, because of the time travel angle, you also get to see the beginnings of how everything kind of plays out and what eventually leads to that future. And I think that's such an interesting thing about making I mean, I'm assuming this isn't just for the TV show, maybe it's straight out of the graphic novel as well, that we are at the beginning stages. Like immediately it's like, here's all the men that are dead, and it seems like they have to, like, it seems like we're picking up like, you see that event happen and we're immediately dealing with like the aftermath. It doesn't seem, I mean, maybe we'll skip around a little bit of like, okay, here's a year left, but a year later, but I think at the very least at the beginning, I think we're going to live in that for a while, but there might be some time skipped involved. It definitely does seem like there are some early day stuff of like, maybe this is like, oh, a couple of days later, or maybe like a week into the world being what it is. Maybe they won't time skip too much. It might not be like 7 years later, 3 years type of thing. Maybe it is like a year, but living in that world, like especially the early days, is definitely going to be interesting, because you don't get to see that too often in post-apocalyptic stuff. Like I said, because of the time travel angle, you get to live in it a little bit more when it comes to like 12 Monkeys. But like I said, it's just such an interesting premise, interesting series. Because like I said, I initially thought this was about like literally the last person on Earth type of thing, but I'm curious, because I was thinking maybe like something happened and like animals got mutated type of thing, and that's what the main protagonist Yurick kind of has to deal with or something. I think it's so interesting too, like from the trailer perspective. I don't know whether like he's kind of taking a backseat, because most of the trailer isn't even focused on him, and maybe that's what this is. Like he is this person, he's like your viewpoint throughout this world, but maybe even he kind of takes a backseat. Like I know this is an anime reference to make, but maybe he's kind of similar to like Naruto Shippuden, where Naruto is always going to lead character, but in certain regards he kind of takes a step back, and the other characters kind of take a more forefront in the story. So maybe to get something in that regard, you know, maybe it's just the way the trailer's cut that you don't get to spend a lot of time with what Yurick's up to. Maybe once we get to the series, then you get to spend more time with him. But I'm curious, like I said, is this virus had any effect on like the animals? Are we going to see like, well, because there are less people around, maybe you get that post-apocalyptic thing of like, oh yeah, animals are running a little more rampant. Like what kind of effect has it had on animal species as well? Like has it wiped out them? Is it just the Homo sapiens, human-wise, that virus has affected males, or has it affected animals as well? There's a lot of things that have to be considered in that regard. Like, the implications of this is going to be the really interesting thing. Obviously, for those who've read the graphic novel, they have a much better understanding of where the story starts and where it eventually kind of goes and how things develop. But as someone, like I said, who hasn't read the graphic novel, it's all a new experience for me. But like, I'm really excited to check this series out. Like I said, now having a better understanding of what ends up happening, but also like still having many different questions of how, like I said, the implications of how it all plays out. But ultimately my question is, what are your thoughts about the trailer? I'm kind of giving you my thoughts about things. I'd love to hear from both people who've read the graphic novels, obviously avoid spoilers too much, but also for those who haven't read the graphic novel. For those who have read the graphic novel, are you excited about this? Does this seem very similar? Does it seem very different? Like, you could be vague enough in that regard to kind of let me know. And for those who haven't read the graphic novel like myself, like, what are your thoughts about it? Are you excited about it? Were you always excited, or were you not excited until you saw the trailer? Like, let me know all your thoughts. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.